Let's talk about the anxious preoccupied individual. The anxious preoccupied, remember now that attachment styles start in early childhood. And so when they were children, these individuals did not have their needs met consistently. And so they went through and experienced intermittent reinforcement, meaning that sometimes their needs were met and other times they were not. So they grew up not being able to feel secure that their needs would be consistently met. Now, what that causes in an addiction to the high of when their needs are met and that feeling of, oh, I feel really good right now because my needs were met and they were met timely. And so they crave that all of the time. And so it creates both intermittent reinforcement that they're experiencing as well as the addiction of, I really want that feeling again. I really want to know that my needs are going to be met consistently and timely, and that feels really good to me. And so they will be individuals that will continually try to work harder every time their needs are not being met because of that experience in childhood. Anxious preoccupieds are your love addicts. These are the individuals that cannot stand to be alone. And so they will hop from one relationship to the other relationship, whatever it takes not to be alone. They do not feel good being alone. They get their needs met and they get their fulfillment and they feel best inside of romantic relationships. That's where they get their value and their worth, which can be really heavy and a lot for their partner. Anxious preoccupieds typically find partners or attract partners that mirror their early childhood experiences. So a lot of times they will end up with avoidance or dismissive avoidance or an FA who is leading avoidance. Anyone who will expose them sometimes to that same intermittent reinforcement. And so they're back in the same boat that they started with as a child. And so they have these deep wounds around abandonment issues, fear and of abandonment of their needs being met. And so they're often clingy and need tons and tons of reassurance. They need to know that you love them, that their relationship is okay, that things are on solid ground. Because of that, they hate conflict because that is a threat that you may leave them or that their needs may not be met. And so that is something that really triggers them. And so the constant reassurance is something that really helps them. Do you love me? And they'll often ask, are we okay? Are you mad? Did I upset you? Or if there's a conflict that arises, they may bring you a problem, but because they value the relationship more over themselves, because they often will self-abandon their own needs, wants, and desires, they will quickly backpedal. Oh, never mind. I didn't mean to bring that up. I was wrong. I didn't see it that way. It was all on me. You know what? Never mind. They'll backpedal, which is what we call a fawn response. And that's because they are so afraid of the relationship ending that they would rather self-abandon their own needs and make sure that the relationship is secure, because that's how they get their validation. And that's where their reassurance comes from, is being in a relationship with somebody else and not being alone. And so it's more important to them to avoid the conflict, sweep it under the rug so that they can make sure that that relationship is maintained, because they hate the feeling of being alone and they deeply, deeply fear you leaving the relationship or the relationship ending. A lot of the time, the anxious preoccupied, when they feel like something is off, and they're very in tune to this because they feel any time that there's a disconnect, because remember, that's how they feel validated and they need that reassurance and security. So if they don't feel it, they will become clingy and needy and they will lean in farther and farther to their partner, oftentimes where their partner will feel almost suffocated because they need so much. But they will think to themselves that if they just work harder, if they just try harder, if they do more, that will make their relationship more secure and that they will be more secure by just doing that. And a lot of times that's just too much for their partner. And so as they're constantly drawing in and getting clingier and needing more and more reassurance, a lot of times in reality, that just pushes their partner away and it's just too much. They just can't meet all of the needs of an anxious, preoccupied partner. The other real struggle that anxious, preoccupied partners have is maintaining boundaries, because they don't want to disrupt the status quo and they really just want to make sure that their relationship is secure. A lot of times they either won't introduce boundaries, or if they do introduce their boundaries, they'll quickly drop them or they're very lax with them, because they will self-abandon their own needs just in order to protect the relationship, because that is more important to them than their own needs. They feel safest knowing that they're in that relationship and they're not alone. The irony of it is that the anxious preoccupied wants nothing more than to be in a close relationship, but they actually are very much emotionally unavailable. Because they are so scared of conflict and of being seen and not accepted for who they are, a lot of times they hold back. They're emotionally unavailable because they're not comfortable bringing up conflict or really being seen in case they're rejected or not accepted, because they're afraid if they bring up conflict or create any issues that you might leave the relationship and they would be abandoned. Or they're afraid if you see them and you know who they really are deep down at their core, that they might be rejected, and so they don't want you to see them. So even though they really want to be in a relationship and they do not want to be alone, they really truly themselves are not emotionally available. So if you are an anxious preoccupied, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it can be done. We've got to work on being able to set boundaries, respect your boundaries, work on breaking that cycle of intermittent reinforcement and retraining the brain so that it doesn't crave that, and working on not necessarily working harder and doing more, but being secure enough that you are able to be alone if that's the worst case scenario that happens in your relationship. And if you're in a relationship with an anxious preoccupied, then it's important for you to know that they're going to need lots and lots of reassurance. They're going to constantly need to know that even if you're not okay with them right at that moment, that the relationship is solid and that things are okay and that you love them and you love them for who they are and that you're okay with them bringing problems to you and creating a safe space for them to be able to do so. So there's a lot more that goes into it and a lot more that needs to be done, whether you're the anxious preoccupied or if you're in a relationship with one. And if you want some tools and techniques for that and you want to dig deeper, keep following or give me a shout out.